Good afternoon. Ted Pulsfer again with MarketCube, and we are thrilled to be sponsoring this breakout. Allow me to introduce Mark Menig, Seattle Seahawks superfan. And he's going to go through his panel of Winning the Future and introduce the panelists. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time in the session here, kind of post-lunch and kind of coming through all that. Wanted to spend a little bit of time today with Liz, Mario, and Russell, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a second and what they do for their respective companies. But we're going to be talking about winning the future. So we spend a lot of time in these conferences trying to balance things that we can kind of in a real tactical way, take something back and operationalize it within our businesses. But then we want to make sure that we also spend an equal amount of time really looking at the changing landscape, the changing ecosystems that we play in, and talk about what and how do we actually win that future in whatever way we each define winning for ourselves, our company, and those types of things. And so we've got a few things that we'll kind of talk through today. We'll try to leave plenty of time for questions, comments from the audience. We do have a fairly kind of intimate crew here, so if you guys have something that you really want to ask a question, in the middle type of thing, just throw a hand up, and I'll keep an eye out and try to find a break in the conversation and make sure we get your question or your comment addressed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz and let you introduce yourself first.
I was reaching for the mic. Hi, everybody. Liz Fortier. I'm the General Counsel of Lucid. I'm also their Data Protection Officer and Corporate Secretary. I'm a lawyer. I've spent probably 25 years, a career working for various tech companies, small and large, public-private. Lucid actually was my first experience with sample in the market research industry, so it's been kind of an interesting ride for me for 3 years. Here's my little blurb I'm going to read to you. So, Lucid is a market research platform that provides access to authentic first-party data in over 90 countries. And I think you've probably seen our logo. It's a human answers platform. I like to think about it as, and this is my sort of naive view of things, but I look at it as a platform where we're really connecting buyers and suppliers of human answers, right? And so there's all sorts of interesting data privacy from my perspective, data issues that are fascinating to me. So I'm excited to be here.
That was a very good blurb. I don't have a blurb.
I shortened the blurb. I could have gone on.
Hey everyone, Mario Carrasco, co-founder of ThinkNow. ThinkNow, we're a multicultural market research firm, and we own and operate a U.S. Hispanic panel, primarily focused on Spanish-dominant Hispanics in the U.S. My background's marketing. Previous to getting into the market research industry, I was at Microsoft at MSN Latino, kind of doing digital online marketing. Started in the market research industry, the small company Garcia Research, where I headed up the online division and built what became one of the first Hispanic online panels, and that company was purchased. Started ThinkNow in 2011.
Hi, I'm Russell Tillitt, co-founder of Embee Mobile. Embee Mobile is a behavioral research and survey sampling platform. We provide on-demand panels, programmatic survey sampling, syndicated data licensing for large market research companies. We have developed and supported these panels all over the world. To my knowledge, we have one of the largest, longest-running large-scale passive mobile measurement panels in the United States today. We've been largely, and I'm a little bit of a newcomer here, as we've largely come at the market research space from the data side first and have shown up at the doorstep of the survey sampling side second. So for me, this is an opportunity to learn a lot more about where a lot of the market research industry has been, and interesting ways that I think it's evolving in more of a data direction.
Got it. Thank you, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mark Menig. I'm the COO at Pure Spectrum. Been in and around the industry for 15 plus years, working at panel companies, research firms, technology firms, working a lot on the data quality, fraud detection side of things. Pure Spectrum is really a research automation platform. So we liken ourselves to being kind of the AWS of online research, and trying to equip all of you with the tools to really automate and make your lives easier in all of the different workflows that exist within data collection and research and data and insights. So that said, you heard a lot of folks up here, co-founders of businesses, technology, been in and involved around it. We're all trying to deal with this changing landscape of survey collection and those types of things. At a conference like SampleCon, it's obviously very heavily weighted towards, that online survey respondent and those types of things. Would love to get some impressions from your various businesses and experiences around technologies that you've employed, technologies that you've created, and really technology that works in terms of making this whole process of getting insights from respondents a little bit easier. Why don't we go Russell first on this one? Put you on
Sure.
the hot seat.
Sure. So I think to some extent, one of the areas, and actually I saw your talk earlier today.
Yeah.
Probably the most important area that we thought where we could add value and where we thought this industry could benefit is at addressing some of the fraud-related issues that happen with a highly distributed solution of networks upon networks upon networks. One of the first things we did is we got rid of the browser. No browser. All surveys are in our app. There's no browser, there's no link. If there's no link, there's no way for someone's going to intercept a link. I could go on. The other aspect is that being able to leverage behavioral data to understand the likelihood that somebody is a quality participant. It is not just a phone farm in Indonesia. We've seen them. We've seen all kinds of phone farms. And implementing algorithms that evaluate users on a continuous basis, not just their IP address, which is pretty much worthless to evaluate anyway, not just email addresses. All these things are so easy to fake, but it's worse than that. Simulators are easy to do. Phone farms are easy to do. So we've put a lot of, I think one of the things that we've done, and we've been able to do just because we're newcomer to the survey sampling space, is that we went after some of the areas that we just said were, I think, fundamentally unsolvable. You're never going to fix the browser problem. No one's going to fix that. Don't use browsers. It's the only way to solve it. I think, once you get rid of the browser, you get rid of I think that's the hostile environment for fraud is browsers. Once you get rid of the browser, you can start doing other things. But it's stuff like that. And I think some of those best practice, I don't know if they're best practices, but some things that I think we've brought to this area is deploying surveys in a way that skip over some of the things that are really easy for people to intercept and cause quality problems.
They're really taking advantage of the mobile devices. We've all got them. We've got them. We've got our notes on them even for our discussion here.
Yeah.
But really taking that to that next level is what I hear you saying, and saying there's some inherent benefits to the way technology has evolved in our devices and how attached to them we are that we can employ.
I'll give you a real easy one, like the way that you can leverage mobile, and this isn't for everyone because everything isn't mobile, of course, but is the battery 100%? It's probably fraud. The battery's never 100% for a real person. Never happens. When has your battery ever been 100%? Just ask, check if it's 100%. Chuck it, not a good user. That's a phone farm, that's a fake user, that's a simulator, or it's a device plugged into the wall 24 hours a day. Almost never is a phone 100%. You could just screen out half your fraud just with that one.
Uber drivers.
Well, if they're driving, we'll take it a survey.
How about you, Liz, in your business, technology? How do you all use technology to make this whole thing a little bit easier?
Well, so I'm going to give you sort of the lawyer bent, right? They can give you the technology, but from my perspective, what the technology makes me think of, particularly with some of the regulation coming through, is the importance of vendor management and really understanding what technologies we're deploying, particularly third-party technologies, right? 5-10 years ago, we really didn't hear a lot about vendor management, and I will just say, you guys, we're going to continue to hear more and more about it. It's a part of GDPR, it's a part of CCPA that's coming. So I would just say, like, you know, when I'm talking to my tech and development teams, right, we're always sort of thinking about understanding the technologies that are being deployed, doing risk analysis, right, security analysis, because I think that just becomes more important. We're going to continue to hear more breaches due to sort of third-party vendors, so that's kind of my plug for just making sure that you know and understand the technologies you're deploying. I will say from a legal perspective, I've deployed OneTrust. I don't know how many of you out there, are any of you using OneTrust in your orgs, do you know, from a GDPR standpoint? Right, so this is really a platform we're using to manage compliance, right? Compliance, data mapping, data inventory, risk assessments, DPIAs. So for those of you who are involved at all in data privacy, data security, that's something we've deployed, which I will say it's really more of a business tool than a legal tool. It's really given us good insight into, you know, our own internal data as well as for, you know, third-party data as well. So it's been a huge help to our organization, I guess I will say that.
So technology being used in a way to help you run your business almost more effectively, which in turn then filters out to being able to spend more time and energy with those respondents, helping, you know, get the insights from them and those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, right, we're in a world where we are all about, or should be about, accountability and transparency, right? So whatever tools you're using to really be more transparent to our consumers.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So, Mario, I'm really curious your perspective on this. You've got a very unique audience that you deal with and focus of your business. You know, we were talking in prepping for this, you know, the march that we're on as a country towards being a majority minority country in, you know, with 20 years probably or less. How does technology play a role in that critical audience that you focus on? I think historically it's always been thought of as a hindrance to that audience as opposed to something that can help it. So I'm really curious what you're facing in your business where technology is playing a role.
Yeah, the true north of our company has been, you know, multicultural consumers, and whether that's on the online panel space, custom research. And what's great about our industry, there's so many innovations that have happened past 3 to 5 years, so many great vendors that we can partner with. So we're not a technology company. We're not necessarily creating technologies. We're going out there in the marketplace, you know, conferences like this, just talk to Russell, talking about ways to integrate, again, with our true north being multicultural consumers. So we're constantly looking, how do we leverage these existing technologies to help companies, our clients, better understand multicultural consumers. And so for us, I mean, the next space that we're looking into is behavioral data. And we see a big white space, specifically in the MarTech world. There's so many MarTech companies popping up using data. Some of them are our clients, but not a lot have large base sizes, at least in the US, of Hispanic, African American, Asian consumers. And we see that, right, despite having more access to data than ever before, we still see huge mistakes made by companies that we know do market research that are kind of, you know, flopping from a multicultural perspective. So we want to leverage technology to help companies understand these consumers that are typically underrepresented from a market research standpoint. And to your point, Mark, it's not that these consumers are not, don't have mobile phones, I mean, or, you know, digital divide. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a matter of just being kind of aware from a representation standpoint. I mean, how do we get these consumers to take our surveys? How do we get these consumers to take our apps? And so that's how we've been leveraging technology, really understanding what our strengths are is multicultural, and leveraging existing technologies to help our clients understand these consumers in a real way.
Sure, that's great. And you said something I want to go dig into a little bit more in the data piece, and you're really looking at that behavioral data. So I'm going to put the bold statement out there that I don't think as an industry we have an issue creating data, right? We were talking about this, you know, in leading up to this too. Societally, it feels like we're exponentially creating data. our refrigerators, our toasters, everything's Alexa enabled and creates data and probably listens when we don't even want it listening, right? But the data creation doesn't seem to be the problem anymore. It seems like we're shifting to a world in data and insights where brands are telling us, hey, we're moving beyond looking at a survey data point as a single thing in a discrete environment, and we're trying to more holistically consume multiple data points, put them together to make a better, more informed decision as a result, right? So it seems to me like the challenge we're facing is more around the consumption, the synthesization of the data itself. Let's go into that a little bit with your businesses. We all deal in data collection. We all deal in generating insights on behalf of our customers. That's our industry. But how is this kind of shifting data landscape playing a role in your business and how you're planning for the future? I'll go to you, Liz.
And I think I'm supposed to say that I'm not giving legal advice.
Yes.
I'm supposed to say
That's
that.
right.
So I'm not speaking on behalf of Lucid. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm supposed to say that. So I will say this. I think what's going to be really, really fascinating for our industry, right, that's really based in regulation, and up until now in the US and most countries, right, the collection, use, storing, right, of data has not been regulated, right? So it's been sort of a free-for-all, honestly, right? We can kind of do as we please for the most part. The US, for those of you might be interested, right, it's sort of sectoral, right? So we care about data in certain industries, right? We care about data in healthcare. Ooh, there people have a right to have their personal health information protected. We care about that. We care about financial information. We care about that, right? Yes, you have a right to have your financial information protected. Some other sort of sects, universities, things like that. But for the most part, we in the US do not today have a right to privacy at all, right? We do not think that way here in the US. And I think, and clearly we're starting to see change, right, in the industry. We're starting to see change. GDPR is a change. CCPA is a change for us, right? That is the beginning for those of you, right? If I talk about nothing else today, I will talk about CCPA. You should all know what it means for your business, right? That is the first stage of regulation for us here in the US, and it's gonna hit our industry, right? CCPA will hit our industry. And so I kind of look at this ecosystem, right, that we all sort of plan. And what's fascinating to me is how interwoven it is, right? The technology, the platforms, the panel companies, the buyers, the ad tech, right? It's all interwoven, and I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how we take what has historically been an industry where we really didn't particularly have to care about data privacy, data security implications. We really haven't for the most part, and how we're all going to sort of collectively decide to handle data privacy going forward. Particularly what we're going to see is these regulations that are coming down, right? CCPA, again, is going to hit us hard in 2020. That's going to affect our buyers, sort of the very end user buyers, and they are going to push this down on us hard, and it's coming. And it's so interwoven. I think we're all going to have to be really honest with one another and sort of sharing responsibility, in my opinion, or it's going to have bad consequences for all of us.
Yeah, no, I hear you saying there's an inherent responsibility with this exponential data that's being collected and how we're using it, and that people have to be evaluating their businesses, preparing for some of the inevitable backlash of that shifting landscape. Yeah, we've collected more data than ever before, but we may at the same time get more restricted in our ability to actually use it. So Russell, I'd love to hear from you in terms of your business is actually, from what I've learned from you, is about kind of combining the survey data, the behavioral data, the
we're right in
kind
there.
of in-app metering type of data.
We have a lot of panels in Europe, and so GDPR definitely was an exercise. Grunt was not intended to be funny, but it kind of was.
CCPA is going to be worse.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah, probably. I'm going to say I think it's the best thing that ever happened to market research. My biggest competitor 2 years ago was an SDK and a weather app. It was going to crush everyone in this room too. being able to collect data for free without permission at any rate you want. You want to think samples being commoditized. 2 years ago, The Economist said data was the next oil. Data was going to be the commodity. That all stopped. Regulation is the best thing that ever happened to this industry. It's going to save it. Because what the tech companies have, what Facebooks and the Ubers and everyone else have, they have vast amounts of exhaust data, vast amounts. No survey is ever going to compete with it. It'll never happen. And they have the technology to mine that data, to process that data, and increasingly, eventually, probably to get insights from that data. That's still a little ways off, but it's not forever. The challenge is they don't have permission. And 2 years ago, no one cared, right? So I think the thing that they lack is permission. Now, the thing that everyone in this room has, I know has, and that we have, is we have permission. We got people to opt into our panels. We got people to participate. We got people to voluntarily engage with us, whether it was for money, for points, for gamification, for anything. It doesn't matter what it is. By the way, it's absolutely and fundamentally ethical to pay people for participating in research. We should never forget that. We have permission. What we lack is the technology to harness the data that we have permission to use. And I think that's where there's a huge opportunity for all of us is really looking to the technology that has been developed by large tech to manage their data resources and ingesting that into our framework where we have permission. I think I think regulation is the best thing that ever happened. And even if it weren't, I know it's going to be hard. GDPR is a pain in the butt, but really, it hasn't probably hit survey sampling as close as it kind of hit behavioral data. It hit us, absolutely.
Yes.
We had to be very, very, and we are very, very careful. But I think, what I saw was our competitors vanish overnight. Other people that had data, I've had a lot of financial services clients basically say they've lost all their sources because they can't. It's like going to the airport and someone says, did you carry this bag all the way here? And a lot of people says, I don't know where the data came from. And suddenly, all those spigots shut off.
Sure.
And I would just add, so I've some prior tech companies I was at were in regulated industries, and here's why that is, I could not agree with you more, right? That is 100% accurate. What ends up happening is, right, these large companies that are regulated, right, they want to go by sample. They are getting pressure from their regulators to show them evidence that they're buying, right, sample from companies who are compliant, right? They have to show that. So it's not enough anymore for companies to just go, oh, yeah, right, Mr. Regular knocking on my door. We're good, right? Don't worry about anyone else downstream. They have to show it. And so I will tell you, right, if we were all really smart in this industry, we would be doing exactly that, which is, right, having compliant organizations, compliant sample, because I will tell you that's going to be what gives organizations a step up and an advantage, because it is coming.
It's definitely coming.
You touched on one kind of hot button issue in what you're saying in terms of the commodity that sample and data and all that, and the increased compression of pricing and the commoditization of sample. Love to hear the thoughts from the panel here in terms of how they see that impacting the industry, where they see us kind of going from here. And Mario, if you don't mind, I'm going to let you start on this one. I'm wondering if you experience it as much as the rest of everybody else, given your niche audience that you focus on.
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to, can we go back to the previous questions?
Of course, yeah.
And I wanted to talk about it from a case study standpoint, and we did some work. I don't know if it was CCPA compliance. I'm afraid to say it next to you, Liz, but this was a couple years ago. But we worked with Google, their multicultural division, which is one of the fastest growing divisions than Google, enabling their AdWords clients to target based on ethnicity. And you would think, why would Google work with a market research company, right? They'd have access to, all of our searches and whatnot. But they wanted to kind of get everything that they understand is based on affinities, based on algorithms, based on what you search. They create a persona or a profile of you unless you've opted in to one of their panels. And so what we did is we helped them recruit a representative sample of US Hispanics and US non-Hispanics, downloaded a Meter app and tracked both of these groups in tandem for a week to kind of understand their search behaviors. And to me, it was a really great case study. You could find it online where, one of the insights, for example, is that, US Hispanic search behavior dips on the weekend, whereas non-Hispanic spikes during the weekend. And this was, even though it's a small insight, I think it really points to the future of our industry, this convergence of behavioral data and survey data. And with that small insight, really driving a lot of value for Google advertisers, right? Imagine you as an advertiser wanting to target US Hispanic, and now you just saved a lot of marketing budget by not necessarily purchasing AdWords on the weekend if you're targeting US Hispanics. And that's, one of those insights I think really is a cool time to be in market research, to be able to merge this growing behavioral data with survey data. So just wanted to share that
Yeah,
case
no, let's bring that kind of full circle then. Do you see that as the path to combating the commoditization then? Is the blending of the survey and the behavioral data as a way to create essentially new data from two other
Yeah,
pieces of
definitely.
data?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot to do with commoditization. We were talking about it as client-driven, right?
Right.
And one of the reasons is it's difficult to get respondents now, and surveys length is not changing, even though we know it needs to be cut down. So I think integrating behavioral is going to be able to enable us to capture a lot of these demographic data points, shortening our surveys, and hopefully, decreasing the amount of commoditization happening in our industry. So I think behavioral is one way. But I also
is
think
it just to collect all the behavioral and then sort it out later? Or do you go into it? I loved your example there,
Yeah.
right? But it was very tangible. You were working with essentially the end buyer, and they were looking at something very specific around search behavior, and which has a direct correlation to their ability to generate, search word advertising and those types of things.
Yeah,
My
I
concern,
think
right?
as an
For this
industry,
audience, so many sample people
Yeah.
are so far removed from what's really trying to be solved. It's like, how do we know what behavioral data to even try to collect?
Yeah, interestingly, I think as an industry, we're in one of the best position in the sample industry
Sure.
to solve that, right? Because you were making the point earlier, we're getting data from everywhere.
Right.
And that's just because we have more data doesn't mean that it's good data. So I think looking at it as a sample industry, whether you're a founder or part of innovation or technology, just starting to play with behavioral and see what value it's going to bring to your clients, because ultimately it's driven by clients. So what kind of value can you bring to your end client, and that's one way to look at it.
Sure. Liz, how about you? Obviously in your world, I think there's a lot of that price compression that happens and things that you try to do to articulate real value to the buyers and things. So.
And the thing that, from a price compression standpoint, the thing that I go back to from just this notion of us sort of sharing the responsibility, right? Historically in the US, we've had this it's a very US way of thinking of, well, I'm just going to sign a contract, I'm going to dump the risk on someone else, right? We're going to negotiate some fee, but I'm going to just try to put all the risk on someone else, right? It's someone else's problem. If I can get some small company to sign a contract with me and I can dump all the risk on them, sort of done, right? Good. I can offload everything on just my entire supply chain, anyone. And I will say, just under the new regulations that are coming, that's not going to work, right? You can't contract out of your duties, right? So I say that you cannot contract out of your duties, right? You can't contract out of GDPR. You can't contract out of CCPA. It doesn't matter if you think you've signed a bunch of great contracts where you have a bunch of suckers who've just signed your forms, right? So this notion of us being in an ecosystem and all of us trying to do the right thing, I think is just going to be really important. And ultimately, how we all share the risk does affect price, right? Because price, right, it's
Well, I hear you
risk is
saying
part of the-
compliance carries a cost,
carries a cost, yeah.
right? And thus far in the history of our industry, that cost of compliance has been very low,
Yep.
if
If anything at all.
non-existent
Yeah,
potentially.
probably.
And I hear you saying that when we talk about, winning the future and everything, that we are very rapidly driving towards a future where we are going to see exponential cost of compliance, which will in turn force us to be rethinking the pricing models and different things.
Yeah, I mean,
because
and it
companies will fail
companies-
at the current price points if they're also trying to be compliant.
Yeah, and it's gonna force, I think, it's gonna force some tough decisions, right? Lucid's a platform or a marketplace, so we're sort of in the middle, right? And I get pressures, I was telling these guys, I get pressures from the buy side on, I wanna know that everyone right, all these panels, right, are all compliant. What are you doing to ensure they're compliant? Have you audited them? Do you have their programs, Liz? Do you see their GDPR program? What are they doing? Tell me. Right? So I'm getting pressure, right? And to ensure that suppliers, and it's hard, right? Because some of these are real small panel companies, and how as an industry are we gonna manage that? Because historically we've liked to just say, well, that's too expensive, right? I can't do it, it's too expensive. I opt out.
Sure.
So anyways.
Russell, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the increased regulatory environment, and I think the regulatory environment reflects a change of users. I mean, people didn't fully anticipate how much their privacy was being compromised by by everyday activities, and I think they're pressuring regulators, even if the law actually, I think, might be following the people a little bit on this one. I do think that will create just a higher cost threshold for participating. I do think that will result in some degree of reversal of commoditization. I think it's interesting to think about what happened to ad rates, right? There was definitely, and I'm not an expert on advertising, so some might be able to correct me on this, but ad rates dropped for a real long period of time. Eyeballs got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and then they didn't. Then they got more and more and more expensive. I think, that wasn't driven by regulation. That was driven by advertising networks doing a better job of targeting, ultimately, and being, it's worth more. You'll spend more money to get that person by better look-alike modeling, and so one of the things that you mentioned is sort of practical things on how, to some extent, how behavioral data can be a mechanism that offsets commoditization pressures in sort of survey sampling or traditional survey sampling. One is do a better job of targeting, right? You don't need a screener for people who play video games. You can just see they play video games. So get rid of your screeners. Get rid of the screeners. You don't need them anymore. If you can target based on behavior, then you can largely get rid of the screeners. You get rid of the screeners, the surveys get shorter, and you can basically get a better margin out of recruiting your people because you have lower dropout rates. I mean, you guys know all this stuff way better than I do, I'm sure. I mean, that's just a real simple example. You can do a better job of targeting and delivering your surveys so you can leverage behavioral data solely from a tactical mechanism, right? But then I also think there's the data enrichment bit, so you're now able to use that to augment your sample data that so you've got, and it's good to have, and as you were saying, it's really important to be able to calibrate that, attitudinal data can't be gotten any other way. You got to ask people questions somewhere, right? You got to understand that they search on weekends or not on weekends and why they do and why they don't. So being able to being able to enrich your subjective data with objective data and having those two things combined to tell a story can be a way that you can really go to your customer and extract, and for the buyers in the room, cover your ears, extract maximum value for your data and maximum value for your insights.
Sure.
Because if it's just a cost plus universe where we're just saying the next person will take care of it and the next person will take care of it, economics is going to do what it's going to do.
I agree. I don't think just layering in the cost of compliance is going to really get us where we need as an industry. We have to, once and for all, prove the value add, the increase in the quality of the insight. How do we move that end buyer's bottom line in a positive direction through the data that we're generating and synthesizing? And those types of things.
And I mean, for us, it's certainly, we're still experimenting. I mean, I think that Google study is a really great example and of that sort of thing. We're still experimenting with what the business delivery solution is for combinations of passive and survey data. I think that's a wide open universe. We're trying to figure it out ourselves. But I think the things that really resonate with customers is that they can leverage the passive data to make their survey shorter. They can make the survey really targeted to something that's really interesting, and that can really drive a value-based conversation that I think helps combat the commoditization forces.
Okay, so before we wrap up and take some questions, just to kind of bring us back to the future, we were talking, the level of kind of consolidation that occurs in our industry. It's constantly there. There's been quite a bit already in the early parts of 2019. What do you see that as a continued trend? What does it mean for our industry? What does it mean for everything that we've talked about here for finding those solutions? And then, countering it with what we were also talking about, where for every consolidation, there's a new company born too. And a lot of times we get a little bit too focused on the companies that are consolidating, and we lose sight of the ones that are just starting and creating something and disrupting and all of that. I think I might actually do it. I told these guys I was going to ask for a raise of hands for how many people in the audience today are here representing companies that didn't exist 3 years ago? Anybody? Hands? 1, 2? Couple. So that's actually less than I would have thought, especially here. But I think if some of the people that weren't able to make the session, I think you'd be really surprised how many people are here today representing companies that truly are trying to create and innovate for the future. And I want to make sure that we think about that a little bit. How do you see that consolidation versus new creation playing out in our industry? How does it impact your business? I'll let you go first, Mario.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it points to something we've already known, that the market research industry is a mature industry, and so consolidation is going to happen. I think what's the consolidation that's been happening lately that's different is that we have acquisitions being handled by companies that don't traditionally play in the market research space. And to me, that's really encouraging that, we don't need validation necessarily from outside industries, but it's nice to see that other companies value what we're doing that don't traditionally play in our space, one. And then two, to Mark's point, I think it's really cool that there's so much innovation still happening in our industry, right? And that's also driving consolidation. In order for these larger companies to compete, they have to acquire companies. And for every company that's acquired, 5, 10 new companies are sprouting up. And tackling these issues that we're talking about, mixing behavioral with survey or a technology play. So the acquisition that's happening lately, to me, have been exciting. I think it points to that our industry is even though it's mature, there's still a lot of innovation there, and there's other industries that see value in the data that we're producing.
Is there, Russell, anything to add there?
Sure. I think it's a tremendous, exciting time. I think the consolidation, I don't want to just repeat, I think Mario said it exactly right. I do think sort of the large incumbents who are our customers, I want to say nice things about them, of course, but they are undergoing structural changes that are probably long overdue, that I think are actually in a way unrelated to market research, just related to corporate inertia. Those, Nielsen isn't going away. They might get taken private, but they'll come back. They're not going anywhere.
Sure.
And I think the things they're going to need, is going to be the types of capabilities and technologies that we've been talking about. So I think for those of us that are finding those niches and trying to bring new solutions to market, I think it's going to be, I think it's actually as exciting a time as I've ever seen it. I think the consolidation bodes well for a lot of people in this room.
Good. Let's open it up to the floor. We got about 5 minutes left, so it's kind of a perfect time to transition, do a little Q&A, see if there's anything that folks in the audience have just kind of burning in your mind that you want to ask anybody on the panel. Question there?
Russell, you mentioned that, the difference between big tech companies that are collecting such a wealth of data and, us as data providers to the market research industry, the difference is permission. Recently I saw that the Facebook app was kicked off of Apple for, the research. I guess what's keeping, these companies from requesting permission? Is it kind of the depth of data that they're afraid to expose that they already have?
Well, a couple of things. I think Facebook was a little bit, I'm gonna say this fast, a little bit broader philosophical answer that might be into this, but Facebook was kicked off the Apple platform because Apple was pissed off that Facebook had circumvented Apple's anti-competitive policies. Let's be clear, that's what that was about. It had nothing to do with privacy. But that service is an issue. Facebook, Google, Apple, Uber, these guys can put their fingers on the scale. We're not them. We're independent measurement companies. I genuinely believe society's expectations of Google, Facebook, and everyone else is different than it is of us. And I genuinely think regulatory bodies will reflect that. We're not picking winners and losers. We don't care if Twitter is up and Twitch is down, or Snapchat is up or Facebook's down. We're just out there measuring. We're the ones protecting consumer choice. We're the ones putting data and objective information into the marketplace. We're the good guys. We're not them. And I think the reality is they can't be us because they've got a dog in the fight and we don't. And I don't think they can ever be us.
Any other questions? One more over here.
Hi. You talked about the cost of compliance with data privacy and regulation around that. I'm wondering if any of you could speak to, do you think the buy side understands that as well and is ready to shoulder some of that burden, or should we, on the supply side, be expecting to do that? Thanks.
Good question. You want to take that one?
I'm smiling. Sometimes I'd say yes, sometimes I would say no from what I'm seeing. I'm also still think I'm still having conversations as to who's responsible for what, right? Who's handling the opt-in consent at what point? Who's a controller, who's a processor? Like, we think that these conversations are over, they're not. There's still confusion. Who's collecting, right, the consent as part of the survey? Where is that happening? Is it happening on the survey platform? Probably not. Right? Is it who's handling it? Right? To me, this is I don't quite know the answer to this. I kind of keep asking, right? How are we getting opt-in consent for the actual survey? Right? Where is that happening? I mean, I know from a legal perspective who's responsible for making it happen, right? It really is the buyer, but is it always happening? And I sort of wonder, can the buyers always, they might not have the ability to do it, right, from a technology standpoint. So when I sort of, again, I go back to this ecosystem, and I think for maybe a mature industry, but I will tell you around this sort of notion of consent and our obligations under the regulations that are coming, there are opportunities to be smart about how, and the services we can ultimately offer to the buyers. I don't know if the buyers have fully sort of, I don't think they have. Have they incorporated that into their fee? Probably not. But I also think we're sort of at the very initial stages, right? We're going to start to have to see some judgments, right, some decisions, some judgments, and then that maybe will change things, the landscape a bit. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think it's fairly unarticulated yet as an industry what those costs are. And I would say, to me, no, I don't think the buyers have any real sense of it because I don't think the suppliers have yet been able to understand it, right? So I know we're at the end of our time here, so
Can I do my one last plug for you guys? Because
Sure.
we kind of didn't do our regulatory session. CCPA, this is my plug to all of you guys. It goes into effect in 2020, but there is a 1-year look back, right? So if you are selling, right, personal information, which is defined, and again, I'm not giving you legal advice, but personal information under this law is defined as broadly as GDPR, right? Selling is almost anything as defined under this law, right? So selling personal information of California residents, pretty much anyone in California is a resident. It's a B2C law, it's a B2B law, and it has a look back into 2019. So if you guys, and if you, just because you comply with GDPR, if you say, hey Liz, no, we did GDPR, we are good, right? Right, there's some overlap, but not entirely. So just because you comply with GDPR does not mean you comply with CCPA. So if you're doing anything with California residents, please go look at this law, right? It's gonna have class actions. It's gonna be a nasty, nasty law for our industry. So like that's my only plug. Please, please go look at it. It's gonna be terrible.
So I
On
will,
that note.
real quick, I'll give you two themes that I heard
That's my
here from
even
today
high note.
to take back to your businesses, right? I like to make sure people can take something back. I heard technology that is going to let you blend and synthesize more data to generate new insights. Make sure that your business is thinking about planning for that and figuring out how to use it, because if you're not, you're going to be late when your buyer is asking for it, right? That's thing one. Thing two, we are driving very fast towards a regulatory cliff, right? I think that was a theme that I heard throughout, impacting everybody's business here in unique and different ways, but with the consistent theme that it is impacting them, right? So use that technology, figure out how you're going to manage your business, operate your business, grow your business in a much more heavily regulated environment than any of us are used to. Those two things, I think, are going to be the keys to the companies that, win the future.
I agree with that.
Thank you, Mark, Liz, Mario, and Russell. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and we'll meet back in here at 3 o'clock.